Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to follow a single piece of code on its totally automated journey. We're talking from a developer's keyboard all the way to a live application, and we'll see how the powerful suite of AWS developer tools makes it all happen. So let's start with the big question, right? How does that actually work? How does code get from that keyboard to potentially millions of users? Not just fast, but safely and automatically. Well, that's the exact problem these AWS tools were built to solve. Here's our game plan. First, we'll get into the why of it all, the whole philosophy behind CI/CD. Then we'll meet the AWS tools that actually build the pipeline. We'll talk a little bit about application architecture, and then wrap it all up with the key takeaways you're definitely going to want to remember. All right, first things first. Before we can even touch the tools, we've got to understand the philosophy they're built on, and that's continuous integration and continuous deployment, or as you'll always hear it, CI/CD. So CI/CD, they're really two sides of the same coin. On the left, you've got continuous integration, the CI part. This is all about developers constantly merging small code changes into one shared place. Then on the right, you have continuous deployment, the CD part. This is where the magic happens, automatically building, testing, and deploying that code. They really are two halves of one very powerful idea. So why do we even bother with all this? Well, it's not just about being fast. When you work in these small, frequent chunks, you find bugs when they're tiny and simple to fix. And when you automate the whole release process, you basically get rid of the chance for human error. It's about building with both speed and stability. It's a real win-win. Okay, so we get the philosophy of CI/CD. Now let's look at the actual AWS tools that bring this all to life. AWS gives you this complete, fully managed toolchain to build out your own pipeline. Honestly, the best way to think about this is like a 4-step assembly line for your software. The second a developer commits a change, it kicks off this amazing chain reaction, moving from one specialized service to the next, with AWS running the whole show. So our little piece of code starts its journey right here in AWS CodeCommit. You should think of this as the central, super secure vault for the whole project. And it's not just for code, but for scripts, images, you name it. It is the project's single source of truth, and it's all tied in with AWS security. The moment our code is committed, CodeBuild just springs into action. It automatically grabs that new code, compiles it, and runs it through a whole series of automated tests. If everything looks good, CodeBuild packages it all up into something that's ready to be deployed. And now, it's time to go live. CodeDeploy takes that finished package, that artifact from CodeBuild, and it handles the deployment. It completely automates the process of getting the new code onto your servers. And it doesn't care if they're EC2 instances, Lambda functions, or even servers in your own data center. So who's the master conductor of this whole orchestra? Well, that's CodePipeline. It's the service that lays out the whole workflow. It watches for changes in code commit, it tells CodeBuild to get to work, and then it hands the final product off to CodeDeploy. It manages the entire process end to end. Of course, this whole thing kicks off with a developer actually writing that code. And AWS gives you a bunch of ways to do that right inside its ecosystem. You've got Cloud9 for a full-blown IDE right in your browser, or you can use CloudShell and the AWS CLI for some really powerful command line access to manage everything. You know, these days, applications are almost never built completely from scratch. They rely on tons of third-party libraries and packages. So how do you manage all of those dependencies in a secure way? Let's take a look at how AWS handles that. This is where AWS CodeArtifact comes into play. It basically acts as your company's private, secure software library. It gives you one central place to store and control all the packages your developers are using. This makes sure they're always pulling from an approved, vetted source, not some random public one. So you keep hearing this word artifact. What does that even mean? Well, it's actually just a general term for the outputs of your build process. Things like your compiled code, deployable packages, libraries, even documentation. It's the thing that gets produced and stored. Okay, let's zoom out from the pipeline for just a second and look at the design of the application itself. This idea of coupling is absolutely critical for building systems that don't break, and believe me, it is a huge topic on the AWS exams. This shows a really fundamental choice you have to make when you're designing a system. On the left, you've got tight coupling, where all the components heavily depend on each other. It's kind of like a house of cards. If one piece fails, the whole thing can come crashing down. What you really want is on the right, loose coupling. Here, the components can all operate independently. This makes your application way more resilient and easier to scale. So, if our components are all loosely coupled and independent, how in the world do they talk to each other? That's where messaging services come in, like Amazon's simple notification service. SNS uses this really powerful pattern called publish-subscribe, or just pub/sub for short. The idea is pretty simple. Instead of components talking directly to each other, a publisher just sends a message to a central topic. Then, any service that has subscribed to that topic automatically gets the message. No direct connections needed. And as you can see here, a publisher can be pretty much anything. An application, a CloudWatch alarm, another AWS service. It sends just one message to an SNS topic. That topic then acts like a fan, pushing that message out to all of its subscribers at the same time. And those subscribers could be an email address, a text message, or another part of your application, like a Lambda function. All right, we have covered a ton of ground. Let's wrap this up with a quick-fire review of the most important concepts. If you're studying for a certification, these are the key terms you really need to have locked down. Let's just run through the whole story one last time. It starts with the philosophy, CI/CD, frequent merging and automated releases. Then you have the pipeline tools, CodeCommit to store the code, CodeBuild to test it, CodeDeploy to install it, and CodePipeline to orchestrate the whole shebang. CodeArtifact keeps your packages secure, loose coupling is your architectural goal for a strong application, and SNS is how your separate components talk to each other. And there you have it, from just a single line of code all the way to a resilient, live application. We've traced that entire journey, and we've seen how each one of these specialized AWS tools plays its own part in creating a modern, totally automated workflow. This entire ecosystem is designed to just get the friction out of software development. It lets you focus less on the process and more on actually innovating. So now that you know the tools, there's really only one question left. What are you going to build with them?